That's where you say good evening back. Yeah. Thank you. I should let you know that I grew up in a part of the country where preaching and teaching is conversational. So I'm used to when the pastor says something, it's almost like there's no rhetorical questions, that if I ask a question, I'm really expecting crowd participation. If you've been to the kind of play they call a melodrama, where the characters on stage say something and the crowd all responds back with boo, hit. Well, maybe don't. Let's not do melodrama. The booing and hissing doesn't work. But it was just more of a dialogue. And Laura's church too, where we grew up back in middle Missouri and southern Missouri, and so church was just loud because everybody just assumed it was a conversation. So the way that we'll approach this tonight, and I hope every night, is I'll begin by saying something like good evening, and just to get the pump primed, you can say good evening as well. If you want to say, that you agree with something, that'd be great. If you disagree strongly, just see Laura afterwards. She's the complaint department, and you can take that up with her. Of Laura, yes. But just understand that if you heckle Laura, she has a long memory. Okay? So, yeah. What else? Questions, hopefully, I don't hold out much hope for me to allow a lot of time for questions because I talk a lot. I usually use up all the time. But if you want to stick around afterwards, you got questions or comments, those kind of things, we'd always be glad to visit with you, get to know you a little bit. Tonight, as we end the session, I do want to ask if you would be willing to stick around for a short prayer time after the service. I'd ask you to do that. One of the members of our congregation, Curtis Mayer, you may, if you've been around much, even if you don't know Curtis, you know Curtis. He's the biggest man in the building when he's here, right? He's at least he's as tall as Van de Graaff and about a Van de Graaff and a half wide and too thick. I mean, yeah, Curtis is just a great big guy, and he has probably hugged you if you've been here. A few weeks ago, Curtis got COVID and was very, very sick. Had to be life-flighted to another hospital in Wenatchee, and then he got staph infection in his lungs, and I mean, it was looking dire. I was on my way to Nashville with my family, moving the kids there, and I got a call from Curtis, and he said, "Pastor, the Lord healed me." And he said, I'm going home tomorrow. They ended up keeping him one extra day, but some great things happening, physically for him and spiritually for him too. And then he texted me just a few days ago and said, "Man, round 2, I've got pneumonia now," and it's some residual effects of COVID that just left him susceptible. And Curtis has been transferred again. They took him to Portland earlier this week. And he's just not doing well, friends. And it was probably, Lisa, 2 hours ago, we got word that if he doesn't turn around tonight, then they're going to give him a tracheotomy, and they're going to move him to a nursing home instead of actively treating him in the hospital. You guys know that's not good news. And so rather than hurrying through a prayer, I know we've got folks here who need to pick up their children as soon as we're done at 8 o'clock, but I'd ask you if you can stick around to pray with us. I'd appreciate it. His older brother, Craig, is also sick right now, not with the same thing, but very sick. And their dear mom, Linda Mayer, she has cancer and is on hospice care. It's just a family that's too hard hit. And the scriptures tell us that when one part of the body suffers, everybody suffers. So I'm going to say let's enter into their suffering with them tonight and pray for them, okay? Let's pray as we get started about what we're going to learn tonight. Lord, I'm very grateful for a chance to be here this evening, grateful for a chance to study together. Every one of us wants to be good at things, but I can live with not being good at golf, and other people can be quite happy and content if they're not any good at hunting or fishing or sewing. But everybody wants to be good at parenting. Everybody knows this is the thing in my life that I just cannot afford to mess up. And yet it's the case, almost all of us, almost all of the time, feel like we're guessing. And as we look at the short-term results, most of us feel like we're guessing wrong a lot of the time. Lord, you helped Laura and me. We've raised our kids now, and we're grateful, frankly, to have survived it with our sanity intact. We're also grateful that we see in our kids the fruits of our labors. And we've got some folks who are active grandparents who are with us tonight, and we've got some folks who are actively raising kids right now. They're guessing like Laura and I were and not feeling that great about it. I pray that you get your arm around them. I pray that you build a sense of confidence in your people. And these folks right here, Lord, they took time out to say, I want to learn how to shape those kids in a way that makes them good, responsible, healthy, maybe even holy adults. So I pray that you would just consider the intent of the hearts of each person in this room and bless them, help them to learn. In Christ's name I pray, amen. This is my dear wife, Laura. She's the best-looking Purcell. She's definitely my better half. She's the wisdom of the bunch. So many times, I've just not known what to do. Or worse yet, thought I knew what to do, and then told Laura what we were going to do. And and she would just patiently say, honey, did you think about... And of course, I had not thought about X. And so I just first want to say that to whatever extent that mine and Laura's effort shaped our kids into the people that they are, and they're old enough, they're making those decisions for themselves now. But to the extent that we shaped them, I just want to give public credit for the lion's share of that being the input and the patience and the prayers and the wisdom of my wife. Laura, still, as wise as you are, how dare we presume to teach a parenting class?
I agree.
What kind of people think they've got it together enough to sit in front of live people and the interwebs and say, let us teach you how to parent? It's because we perfected it, right?
No.
No. It's because we really just need lots of attention and spotlight, right? No, not that. No. The reason that we're doing this is because we've been blessed in a handful of ways. And I would say that kind of the big umbrella term is that Laura and I were raised in the church. We all know that institutionalized religion has lots of problems and corruption, right? Nod your heads like this. But Laura and I also grew up in churches that, though imperfect, they had a tight-knit sense of community and a shared sense of responsibility for one another. And we also grew up in a time and place in the country where we were taught that part of being a decent human being is respecting your elders. And so we listened and watched and were taught, watch these people. And so it's been being part of the church that has really helped us raise kids. But how about the other stuff, Laura? I mean, we had these examples, but what's the other source of know-how for Purcells as parents?
We read a lot of books.
Read a lot of books, yeah.
We watched some parenting videos.
Yeah.
We watched other parents parent their children
Yeah.
and would pull little nuggets away from that at times, things that seemed to work well for them, and their kids were turning out really well. So we thought, oh, let's try it.
Yeah. I mean, we watched, in so many ways, it's like a best practices thing. Watch the businesses that are successful and do the things they do, and your business will probably succeed. And we watched some people who, by the time they were down, to kid 4, 5, reaching adulthood, we were watching these people be productive and healthy parts of society. And so we went to them and said, please teach us. But we also, we had Jack and Nancy Sitton. Mm-hmm. Jack and Nancy, tell them about Jack and Nancy.
Jack and Nancy were an older couple in our church that when we got there, they were the ones that actually took us around on our interview, and then they just kind of really took us under their wing, and they wanted the kids to call them Grandma and Grandpa, and they would sometimes they just have them over on a Saturday, and Jack would take Noah in the garage, and they just build airplanes. Yeah. And Faith would be in with Nancy. They'd be cooking or making cookies or something like that. They were just a blessing to us. They were great with our kids.
Yeah. And they did that to kind of give us a break, but also to give our kids another adult figure that they could look up to. And then Nancy, in particular, was just one of those people that she felt free to give advice, but she wasn't one of those annoying people that, is correcting you all along the way. When she took us in as family, she really took us in as family. And so she would never embarrass us in front of the kids or in front of anybody else, but she'd pull one of us aside and say, hey, I just saw this interaction between you guys and Noah. And when I was a mom, or when I was running my classroom, and she just helped us with things that we just didn't know, that she had learned either the hard way or whatever. But I look at them and say we had surrogate parents and we had mentors. And so I would just encourage you to take a look and, frankly, skim the cream off the top. Find some families that you look at and you admire the way that you see the kind of family unity and cohesiveness. You're not going to find a perfect family, but if you find some folks that you've seen somehow manage to raise kids well, ask them how they did it, and they'll not only share with you, some of that wisdom, but they'll likely be people that will also pray for you as well. Yeah. And so we're sharing tonight, not out of the depths of all of our collection of wisdom, but we have collected some wisdom from other people, and we just think that all good things should be shared, right? And so, but honestly, Laura, I'm feeling a little bit like, it's 20 years ago, our district superintendent asked me to speak at this pastors retreat. All of the Nazarene pastors from Montana and Wyoming, all in the same place. He said, Cliff, I want you to speak to all of the pastors, teach on the subject of how to raise your kids to love the church. I said, Larry, my kids are 5 and under. I don't even know. I don't have any clue what I'm doing. I don't know if it's working and all that. And so it feels a little bit like tonight. But we also have curriculum that we've relied upon. So all of the really good stuff comes from Laura and a book that I read. Okay, but what we're gonna do over the course of this week and the next 3 weeks following is just really share with you 2 key principles for parenting. And if you're actively parenting right now and feel like you need one hand to turn the pages and the other to pull your hair out because you're just frustrated with your kids, parenting can seem really, really, really complex. And certainly there's a lot of layers to that onion. But I also want you to know that if you learn these 2 principles that we're going to talk about over the course of the next month, you get them really stuck right in here at the front of your brain, and you actively look for ways to do these 2 things, just these 2 things. If you will simplify your parenting to, am I going to do this or am I going to do this? The 2 things that we'll learn in the next 3 weeks. I promise you it's going to make a difference in the way that you parent. It's going to make a difference in the atmosphere in your home. It's going to make a difference in the kind of people that your children become in the short term and the adults that they become in the long term. So get that. 2 things. Only 2 things. There's a handful of teachers in the room. There's going to be a test, and there's only 2 things on it, and I'm going to tell you both of the answers, okay? So 2 things. Be encouraged. 2 things. If you can remember these 2 things, it's going to make a difference for you. Every kid we know is unique, and so anybody who teaches, here is the blueprint for parenting. You have to do it like this. How many of you have ever, read a set of blueprints and, built your own home or were involved in construction? Blueprint people? Yeah. Have you ever seen a set of blueprints that got to the end of the building project and looked exactly like it did at the beginning? Blueprints get modified, baby. And so anybody who would come to you and say, this is exactly the way to parent, number 1, they don't know what they're talking about. Or number 2, it's just implied. You better know your kids and know them well enough to make a few adjustments along the way. Every child is unique, and there are also different ways and styles of parenting, and those things the styles of parenting can be influenced by a number of things, like the way that you were raised, the time and culture in which you were raised. It can be affected by some really negative reaction against your parents because of the way you were raised, right? How many of you, be honest, ever said after your parents did whatever, I'm never going to do that to my kids? Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then how many of you, somewhere in the first 3 years of your first child's life, heard you saying Heard yourself saying the same things, yeah, and doing the same things, right? Guilty. Okay, so you were taught how to parent by your parents. There's the reality. And when you are hard pressed, if you do not consciously think about how to parent, you will be your mom. You will be your dad. If you don't think intently all of the time about parenting, you will react as a parent. And when you react as a parent, it will almost always be repeating the set of circumstances in which you grew up. Some of you are having cold shivers right now. That's okay. But the question is, if, dependent upon your personality, your culture, your parents, time and place in which you grew up, religious setting, irreligious setting, is there a way, an approach, let's say, to raising children that can, with fairly consistent results, produce healthy and mature adults? I'm going to tell you that there is. Now, there may be more than one way, but we're gonna look at parenting in 4 different styles of parenting. And one of those 4 ways of parenting, as measured by results that I'll tell you about here in a little bit, very consistently outperforms the other 3 styles of parenting. Okay? So you can take any one of these 4 approaches, but you just have to understand that one of them produces consistently better results than the other. The characteristics that most Christian parents would like to see developed in their children when polled were a handful of things. Some internal values and then some external behaviors. And the internal values that most Christian parents, when the poll was taken, said that they would like to see instilled in their children were motivation, confidence, and integrity. Okay? Motivation, confidence, and integrity. At some point, the parents wanted the kids to do their chores, wanted to see them get a job, wanted them to see them not scared of their own shadow, and wanted their kids to be honest in speech and in all their dealings. Everybody in here wants that for their kids, right? I mean, everybody wants to be married to somebody like that. Everybody wants their neighbors to be like that. Everybody wants their kids to be like that too. That's those internal values. When it came to external behaviors, it was interesting. When they polled Christian parents, they said they hoped that their kids would show a respect for authority and a love for God and a love for other people. So put those things together. We've got these internal values. We want them to feel confident instead of afraid or looking down on themselves. From that place of confidence, we hope that they would be motivated in life to approach whatever it is, their studies, their work, their relationships. And we wanted them to engage in all of those things with integrity. And we hoped that those things internally driving them would manifest with them showing respect to authority, whether that's governing authorities or a boss or parents, right? But we also wanted to see something else. We wanted to see them love God and love other people. A bunch of pastors are really happy about that because they think maybe the people were paying attention. They want for their kids the very things that I've been wanting for them. So get this. Research shows that there's a link between children who exhibit those internal values and external behaviors and the style of parenting that their mom and dad choose. Okay, there's a real link between the kids who exhibit those internal values and external behaviors and the style of parenting that their mothers and fathers choose. And very specifically, they found that how much acceptance and accountability the parents provided would determine the outcome. Okay, so there was one style of parenting that produced the consistent results, a real link between what the parents chose and what the kids chose later, and very specifically in the midst of the whole cloud of parenting values and the whole cloud of parenting actions, they found that application of acceptance and of accountability showed the highest correlation with the good values and good behaviors of kids. All right, we're going to unpack that a little bit. Let me help you understand what we mean by acceptance. And Lori, you're going to help us with a few definitions as well. Acceptance and accountability are those two things that I advertised at the beginning when I was talking all big about how it'll change the atmosphere of your home in the short term and it'll affect the kind of adults your kids become. Acceptance and accountability. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about those two things tonight. Next week, we're going to spend the entire time talking about acceptance, both what it means and how you can deliver that to your kids. The next week, we're going to talk about accountability, and that's a little bit of a thornier bush for us to talk about because parents end up all over the spectrum about what's appropriate in terms of accountability, and our culture is changing very rapidly too in terms of what is acceptable in terms of applying accountability. But acceptance and accountability, let's first get some definitions on the page for us. Acceptance is defined as, what do you got, Laura?
Showing love and support to one's child.
Yeah, and I'm going to put another word in there, approval. Showing love, approval, and support to your children. One more time, showing love, approval, and support to your children. So there's that one. Second one is accountability. What have you got for a definition for us, Laura?
Directing and correcting the actions of one's child.
Okay. Acceptance is showing love and approval and support, and accountability is directing, and one and you're done, right? Just tell them once. Here's what an ignoramus I was as a young parent. I remember giving young Noah a bath and later young Faith a bath, and they're splashing and doing things, and after a while, enough. I just need to get the bath done and get the kids to bed so I can have some me time, right? And so I'd tell them, okay, quit splashing, and what do? And I remember this like it was yesterday, looking at a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and saying, now repeat after Daddy. I will obey, first time, every time. I actually thought they would learn the phrase and then do it. First time, every time. Just like I obey God. The first time I ever heard anything from him, I just said, yes, sir, and hopped to it, right? Oh, man, the patience of God with me, it was tested so many times. But, the business of showing love, approval, and support to the kids, and then directing, you end up having to correct actions too. You tell them the first time, and then you're going to have to kind of bend their path a little bit, bend their will a little bit, directing and correcting the actions of our children. But I want to go a little bit deeper and dig into a handful of those definitions as well. So back up to the definition of acceptance. It's defined as showing love and approval and support. So let's define love, approval, and support. Love, you got to get this one. I'm telling you, if you get this one, I have to limit the number of times that I say this is going to change your life, but I'm telling you in the most literal sense, if you come to understand what the word love really means, if you get this here and then drive it 15 inches into here, I'm telling you that love will reorient your life immediately, if you know what it really means. I do a lot of weddings, and so I do a lot of premarital counseling, and some couple will come to me and say they want to be married, and I'll ask them why, and they'll say, well, because we're in love. They say love, but it's love because it's all the syrupy feelings that they have. And when I push a little bit deeper, there's not another level. They're just still in love with each other and so excited about being in love. And when I start talking to them about love with an L instead of love with a W, they start giving me these looks like, man, you're a serious buzzkill, preacher. Here's the definition. You got to get this. Old Testament was written in Hebrew a long time ago. New Testament was written in Greek also a long time ago. Both of those languages have multiple words for love. We have one word for love. It's love. We say things like, I love Laura Purcell, I love macaroni and cheese, and I love the Kansas City Chiefs. And Laura sits here confident that I don't mean the same thing, that I prefer her more than macaroni, right? Yes, and the Chiefs, okay. And the Chiefs, yeah. But those other languages have more than one word for love. But get this, every single word in both of those languages, both of the biblical languages, every word for love has at its root this meaning, to prefer. To prefer. So, whenever you find the word love, just take that out and put the word prefer or preference in its place, and you'll understand what it really means. So how about this? Here's this verse from 1 John. Greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Greater preference has no man than this. He lay down his life for. Why would I lay down my life for Laura? Because I prefer her well-being over my own. Right? How about you remember football games back in the day, NFL, there was always a guy in the end zone holding the John 3:16 sign? Yeah. For God so preferred the world over himself that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. Think about it this way. When you look at your children and they've done something wrong and you've disciplined them and they're all upset at you and you're upset too because you didn't want to have to, take away their whatever. And they say, "Mommy, why did you do that?" And your answer is, "Because I love you." And the answer is, "Because I prefer your well-being over my feelings. I'm going to do the right thing for you even when it hurts me." Why do you spend money on a new pair of shoes for the kids and wait to get a new pair for you? Because you prefer their well-being over your own. You ever been in a place where hopefully not, but have you ever been in a place where you had to choose whether the kids ate or you did? It's not even a hard decision, is it? Why? Because you prefer their well-being over your own. That's what the word love means. So look at this. Acceptance will be defined as showing that you prefer the kids' well-being over your own. Let's talk about approval. Approval means I like you. I like you. See, your kids can tell if you like them. And lots of folks have said this. You probably said it to somebody in some context. I love you. I don't like you right now, but I love you. If you tell a child, I don't like you, they'll remember it for a lifetime. And it will override virtually every I love you that you ever speak to them. Because they don't understand that the word love really means I prefer your well-being over my own. And they don't understand that mama or daddy could actually dislike their actions and still prefer their well-being, right? So let's talk about acceptance. It's showing a demonstrated preference for their well-being over our own. Approval means that we like them. Hey, listen, if you don't like your kids, you need to pray about that. There's something likable in every single human being. And if you have just lost perspective because you're stressed out from too many kids for too long at too many decibel levels, I get it. I remember being there. There's something in the heart of God. I wish more people understood. God doesn't just love you. God also likes you. I preached a sermon like that one time. You wouldn't believe how many people got mad at me. And I stood my ground. I'll preach it here sometime. Listen to me. Feel this. God likes you. He doesn't tolerate you because he's obligated to love you. He likes to be with you. He thinks you're funny. He thinks you're cute. He loves your ideas. He loves to watch you do the thing that you do. He's drawn to you. He prefers your well-being, but he also likes you. And maybe if you're struggling with a personality conflict with one of your kids, maybe it'd be a good thing before you went to bed tonight if you just jotted down 3 things that you like about your kid or your kids, and maybe ask the Lord to drive those from here, that 15 inches down into your heart. Okay? Approval means you like them, and support means that you'll cheer them on and encourage them. Listen, there's enough dream killers in the world. Your kids will run into everybody else in the world who tells them they're no good, or tells them that they're ridiculous, or tells them that they can't ever do it, or tells them that's not practical. There's enough dream squashers in the world. They need support, and support isn't just something you say, I support you. It takes the form of you encouraging them to go at it and to try it and to go after their dreams and to cheer them while they're trying. Okay? There's all the definitions. I know it seems like we're camping out here for a long time. We are on purpose. Acceptance, something that kids need. They need to be shown that you prefer their well-being over your own, that you like them, and that you cheer them on and a little pat on the back or the pat on the head that keeps them pulling hard in the harness toward the things that God has birthed in their hearts. Accountability is directing and correcting the actions of our children. And directing, yep, you can say a whole lot, but kids are really good studies of human character, and character is usually demonstrated by actions. Right? The character is revealed. You can say whatever, I believe this, and this is important to me. And whatever you do, that's what you truly value. And kids are really good at sifting all of that out. And so it's extremely important that when we talk about our values to our kids, that we also live them. That if we tell our kids, you've got to be honest, they need to never have a memory of mom or dad lying to each other, or lying to the other kids, or lying to the neighbors. We're not feeling well, so we're not going to be able to go to the... Right? Every little time that our kids hear us make an excuse, they hear us lie, it teaches them that it's okay for them to do that as well. And whatever we model to our kids, those are the values that they really will take into their own character. And believe me, if you are a liar, your kids are going to hold you accountable for that. They'll say it, in front of the neighbors or your mother-in-law. They will out you big time, hard, in humiliating ways. Or when they're teenagers, they'll throw back every little lie. They'll throw every one of them back in your face, right? Accountability. That's a big deal. It's directing our kids, so we've got to model the kind of things that we want to see them do. But it's also very important that we correct them. And listen, this was a big deal for me because I was a failure when it came to correcting. I grew up, my mom's side of the family, that whole side of the family, very, very strict requirements, high expectations, and harsh punishment immediately if you failed to comply. And so, again, you parent like your parents do if you aren't thinking your way through this. And I found that far too late in raising our first son that I did not understand what the word correcting meant, because I thought correcting meant bringing the hammer. Now, granted, if Noah was here tonight, he would tell you I needed it, because that kid was wound like an 8-day clock and had an iron will like his mother.
I think we know
like his mother's husband. And and I thought that you just always had to bring the hammer. And so I brought the hammer. It was much later that I learned that correcting is just teaching and modeling again. It's just with patience saying, one more time, let me show you what to do. One more time, let me tell you. One more time, let me teach you. It's just, get that definition because it's really important. Correcting is not synonymous with punishment. Correcting is, with the help that God gives you, teaching and modeling one more time. Teaching and modeling again. Okay? There's kind of our working definitions. Acceptance, showing love, approval, and support. It's showing preference and that you like and you cheer them on as they go. You're going to model and teach them how to live, and then you're going to model and teach it again when they don't get it right the first time. Acceptance and accountability then are these two big things in the life of a kid and in the parenting plan. And if you take a look at the screen, you'll see that they can be graphed. And so take a look at the up and down axis. Okay, this one right here. This is acceptance. So we've got high acceptance at the top, we've got low acceptance at the bottom, and then this is the accountability line right here. And if you remember anything from, say math classes, maybe some science classes when you're in school, you can see that this then gives us 4 different quadrants. Okay, 4 different quadrants. And these end up being the places where we'll identify styles of parenting. Children will experience life very differently based on the parenting style that is chosen by the parents. Now, hear that sentence, chosen by the parents. I know much of the time it feels maybe like you're parenting automatically. Knock it off. Parenting automatically is how you end up repeating mistakes that were made by generations before us. with the help of God, with good instruction, and thinking our way through this, we can choose how it is that we parent. And know this, that your kid's experience of life in this world, positive or negative, will be determined to a disproportionate extent by the style of parenting that you choose. Let me ask you a question. And it's kind of hypothetical. Do you want your kids to experience life as healthy and happy and joyful? There is a style of parenting that more predictably produces that. If you choose it, your kids are more likely to experience life that way. If you choose one of the other types, your kids get a diminished experience. If that doesn't put enough in you, hear this. Not only does it affect the way your kids experience life in the here and now, the style of parenting that you choose will have a disproportionate effect on the kind of adults that they become. Now, our kids are now young adults, and one of the great things about that is, celebrating, hey, some free time for Cliff and Laura. And then one of the tough things about that is, oh no, they get to make adult decisions now. That's a little bit scary. And as we watch them, they are their decisions. They are making them. But Laura and I also are not scot-free on this deal, because they bear the marks of mom and dad's decisions about the way that we were going to parent them. And they'll throw some of that stuff off, and some of it they won't be able to shake because we got inside their heads. But we have to own the fact that we are shaping our kids by the way that we choose to parent. I know we kind of knew that to begin with, but you got to let that thing kind of sit in your mouth for a little bit. You got to really taste that. The decisions you're making today in the way you parent your kids are determining the kind of adults that they will one day be. If we look at this quadrant over here, this one right here that I'm kind of coloring in for you. Is that working up there? It is, okay. That I'm coloring in for you. This is parents who exhibit both high acceptance and high accountability. Parents who exhibit high acceptance and low accountability are over here. We're going to color that one in blue, okay? Then we've got parents who exhibit low accountability and low acceptance over here. And then finally, we've got parents who exhibit high accountability but low acceptance right here. 4 pretty distinct differences. High acceptance, high accountability. And we've got high acceptance, low accountability. Low acceptance, low accountability. Low acceptance, high accountability. Those 4 different styles. And we'll give them names here in a minute. Just know this. Out of those 4, children whose fathers and mothers exercise the highest levels of acceptance and accountability. That's these guys right here. The children of parents who exercise the highest levels of both acceptance and accountability consistently show the highest levels of those internal values and external behaviors. Remember the internal values? We wanted our kids to be motivated. We wanted them to be confident. We wanted them to live lives of integrity. We wanted them to have a respect for authority, both human authorities and divine authority. And we also wanted them to love God and love others, to prefer the well-being of God and of other people over themselves. The children who exhibit those things most consistently were children of parents who showed the highest levels of acceptance and accountability to their kids. Everything else becomes a sliding scale. The style of parenting then that utilizes the highest levels of acceptance and of accountability, we're going to call, for our purposes, effective parenting. If it produces the results that we look for, then this methodology is the effective way of producing that. Okay, so we're going to call that effective parenting. That's in your book. Yep, that's this one right here. Okay, effective parenting. If we take a look over at, let's talk about that for just a minute. Children whose parents, got that. Talk about the next one. Children whose parents exercise high levels of acceptance, okay? High levels of acceptance, but low levels of accountability. That's these guys over here, and they are permissive parents. We call this type permissive parenting. And frankly, this isn't I don't mean this to look down my nose at some other parent as though there's just a difference in personality or style. It's poor parenting because of what it produces in the lives of the kids. The permissive thing usually ends up showing itself not so much in the internal values of the kids, but in their external behaviors. When you see children who consistently behave poorly, there are exceptions, but most of the time, their parents have done a great job of accepting them, no matter what that little rugrat does. No matter how terrible they are to their teachers or their babysitter, their parents still show high levels of acceptance, as they should. But they're applying very low levels of accountability, and because of that, the children act in ways that where their behavior is less than desired by the neighbors and by the parents, okay? So that's the permissive parenting style. Children whose mother and father exercise low levels of acceptance and low levels of accountability. That's these guys over here, right? Low accountability and low acceptance. They're neglectful parents. And there's kind of this default setting in our heads because of some cultural things where we think this must be the worst form of parenting. If this is a style of parenting, they shouldn't even call it parenting because it's neglecting children. And anytime you use the word neglect, we know that government officials can get involved and ought to. If they're not being held accountable, if they're not being granted acceptance, then they're probably not having their basic physical needs met either, right? So if a child is neglected, trust me, the administrators at the school are having a tough conversation. Do we report? How soon do we report? How will we know when the line has been crossed where we have no choice but to report? Okay? But as bad as that is, neglectful parenting is not the worst style. Take a look at this. We're going to look at controlling parenting. And it shows high accountability, but it shows low acceptance. And you'd think that neglect produces the worst, but it doesn't. When we look at those internal values and we look at the external behaviors that most Christian parents are saying, I want to see these things in place in my kids. I may want some other things too, but I definitely want those things in place inside and on the outside. The style of parenting that is least likely to produce that isn't neglect. It's controlling, where the requirements are set so high that a kid feels like they can never meet them. And no matter if they do, the kid never feels loved, accepted, and supported, approved of by their parents. I'm printed on front and back, so sorry I'm doing this a lot because I'm losing my place in my notes. But hear that again, because you got to feel this. The style of parenting that is least likely to produce a kid who has an ounce of self-confidence. The style of parenting that is least likely to produce a kid who wants to get up in the morning, put their boots on, and get after it. The style of parenting that is least likely to produce a kid who becomes a functioning, productive adult is a controlling parent who keeps bearing down and bearing down and bearing down on a kid. Laura and I have had this conversation a number of times because I second guess myself a lot because I feel like I think I'm a much improved parent. I think Luke got a much better parent than Noah and Faith did, and I think that both of the younger ones got a better parent than Noah did. He was our first. You guinea pig on him, right? You don't know what you're doing, but you act like you know what you're doing, and you just keep trying. But I think I was, in many ways, I was a controlling parent with Noah because I dropped the hammer and dropped the hammer and dropped the hammer and dropped the hammer. And I'll never understand people who say, I don't have any regrets in life because all the decisions I made me who I am today. Well, I get that. I just wish I was a better man than I am right now. I think I should be farther along than I am right now. If I'd made different decisions, I'd be a better man than I am right now. I'm working at it hard right now, but if I'd made better decisions when I was 20 and 30, I wouldn't have to live with some of the regrets in my life. And one of my regrets is that I was a harsh disciplinarian with our oldest. And Laura...
But you were always encouraging of him. I mean...
Tell me about that some more, because I need to hear it.
So, yes, he got punished quite a bit, but at the end, you would leave, and then you'd come back when you'd come back into the room.
When I'd cooled down.
Yes.
Yep.
And you would have a conversation with him every time. And you'd talk about, okay, what did you do wrong, and why did I have to correct you, and you know that I love you, and you know that this is for your own, your own good, blah, blah, blah. But you always, always, always hugged him. You both said you loved each other at the end of it. It wasn't like you just came in, dropped the hammer, and then went to bed for the night and didn't ever talk to him. Till the next morning. You always went back in and talked it out with him.
I'm hoping that Noah remembers it like you do. That's my hope.
That's the
right?
truth.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. That's my highest hope, right? This controlling parenting thing, you got to get this too. Controlling parenting provokes rebellion. You think that it's most likely to bring about compliance, and it often does in short term. But it builds a resentment in a child that will end up boiling over in rebellion. Josh McDowell, Christian apologist, put it this way. I remember hearing this from him when I was a teenager, wondering what in the world was going on in my head and heart. He said, rules without relationship breed rebellion. Rules without relationship breed rebellion. If you're hammering on that kid all the time and they don't have a clear sense that you prefer their well-being over your own, that you like them, and that you're cheering them on, they're going to get it right the next time. If they don't have that clear sense, there's going to come a day when they say, I don't care what they want. I never could measure up anyway. No matter what I did, the times that I did get it right, they still didn't like, prefer, and support me. Then can I be like normal human being and just say it like the kid's feeling it? Okay? Don't kick me, don't tell me I can't be a pastor anymore. Here's what the kid's thinking. Screw that. I'll do it the way I want to. Yeah. The scriptures tell us. It especially points at fathers. Can I just talk to all the men in the room for a minute? Fathers, do not, Faith is calling you. Okay. Well, so apparently at least one of our children doesn't
Maybe
dislike us.
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh no, the kids are listening. In the scriptures, the Apostle Paul tells us, fathers, do not exasperate your children. It comes as a command, like with the inspiration of God behind it. Like right alongside don't murder is dads, do not frustrate your kids. Don't push them to the place that they blow up at you or lose hope. And that was one of my concerns. I'm still not altogether convinced that there weren't times that I broke my son's will. When he just got to the place where he would just give in, not because he wanted to obey, he just gave up. And I was not obedient to the Lord in that way. Laura, talk to us about the little parenting quiz that they were supposed to do ahead of time.
Okay.
If I know I didn't get that thing up on the screen very quickly, but hopefully you saw that and took a couple of minutes to do that analysis at the beginning.
There's a self-assessment, parenting self-assessment on pages 5 to 7 of your little booklet. And you can take the scoring from that. On page 19, there's little boxes that you can count how many A's, how many B's, how many C's, how many D's. And then it will kind of show you where you fall in the quadrant there.
Yeah, so you've got kind of a score sheet in your book right there, and if you look, it's got A, B, C, D in the quadrants. Just put the numbers in. Why don't you just take...
Score sheet's on page 19.
Yeah, just take 1 minute to transfer your numbers there. And Laura and I will be up here praying for you when you get the results of your own self-assessment. Oh, yeah, if you had 5 kids and you parented them all differently, good luck. Pick number 3, because us middle children are delightful. Yeah. Let me just tell you, while you're scoring that, I had Laura take the assessment today. I didn't have the courage to do it myself, mind you, but I had Laura do it. And
That you didn't tell me.
you are on a need-to-know basis. And we got the results, and Laura was not very happy with herself. And that actually gave rise to a really good conversation between the two of us, where I said, honey, how are you feeling about yourself today? I think maybe you were a little bit hard on yourself. And we went back and went through those questions, and we arrived at some different answers for her than we saw at first blush. So here, the reason I'm telling you that is this. If you just found out that you are a controlling / neglectful / permissive parent, we are not calling CPS on you this evening, okay? Number 2, you shouldn't give your kids up for adoption at the end of this evening. You're not the worst parent in the world. You're not a failure of a parent. Nobody who shows up and says, I want to learn how to be a better parent is failing as a parent. Period. Okay? Just know this, that you may have exhibited tendencies toward one of these that was less than ideal. And what that does for you is it puts you in a position where you now get to choose to parent differently. If we were talking about anything other than parenting, and you had this awareness that you could do something better, in spiritual terms, we would refer to that as you came under conviction. That God's Spirit spoke to you and said, there's a better way. Come over here and join me in it. Why don't you look at the results of your assessment the same way as God just saying, hey, there's a better way over here. Come join me in it. Let's talk about the themes that kind of identify each one of these, and then we'll burn real quick to the end. Let's talk about, first get this. If your numbers are generally higher on the right side, okay, look what I'm kind of highlighting right here. If your numbers were higher over here, then you are a parent who tends to stress accountability over acceptance. If your numbers laid in the top half, okay, you thought it was going to go to the other side. No, but if they lie in the top half, your stronger number, then most likely you are a parent who emphasizes acceptance over accountability. And look, if you emphasized acceptance and you emphasized accountability, where does that take you? Right here into the sweet spot, right? Let's talk about each of these real quick. Each parenting style has certain characteristics and ramifications for the children. Neglectful parenting is characterized by absence. They may be physically present but unavailable. Man, how about this? Let me just you want a life hack? Like real quick life hack, something that you can look at today and go, I can do better instantly. If your kid is in the room, put the phone away. Just if the kid's in the room, it doesn't matter what the game is or the social media or the news or the distant relative or the boss. Put the phone away. Because if your kid gets more attention than the phone, you are not a neglectful parent. Neglectful parent is characterized by absence, by spending little time and, actual abandonment or forms of abandonment. When a father or mother isn't present with the child, they are unable to then give acceptance. You see, you may really deeply love and approve of your kids, like them, and want to support them. But if you don't show up, they can't ever know it, because no kid gets a crystal ball for their birthday. The only way that you can communicate to your kids' acceptance is if you show up, right? You got to be present. Got to be present. Here's the problem with neglectful parenting. The absence teaches the child that he isn't important. And it teaches them that they can treat other people the same way. The absence teaches kids, you're not important enough for me. And I'll tell you, from the experience of a kid who watched his dad drive out of the driveway and leave the family, you know what I was thinking as I watched him go? Why doesn't he love me enough to stay? It wasn't about mom. I wasn't valuable enough for him to stay. And I know that wasn't really what was going on, except yes, it was. He had problems with mom, but he didn't love us enough to stay and work through them. We weren't important. And if you teach your kids that they aren't important, they'll treat other people the same way. Permissive parenting is characterized by undercorrection. You either don't attempt strongly enough to correct your kids, or you don't hang with them and outlast them. Listen, every battle you enjoin with your kids, you have to win it. There's some battles that aren't worth fighting, like whether they, I don't know, eat their vegetables, stay in their chair. There's just some things they're just most of the dinner table things. They're not really going to turn a kid into an axe murderer if he doesn't clean his plate. They're really not worth fighting over. But once you enjoin a battle with your kids, you have to outlast them and win it. And permissive parenting is when you just get too tired to follow through on the things that you told the kids. And because of that, disobedience is then reinforced with kids. You're actually saying it's okay for you to disobey. Just keep at it long enough that I give up and your way becomes the right way.
And I'd like to say something regarding permissive parenting because I am a bit guilty of this. Only with our third kid. By the third one, I was like, I don't care.
Faith is going to call again right now. She's going to call again. She's saying amen.
I remember, though, thinking, I really have to stay engaged here because it's so easy to just check out. He's a good kid. He'll be fine. But I really had to make myself stay engaged because it was really easy to just say,
He still got whichever groceries he wanted. He got snacks like no other kid.
I don't know what it is about the later kids, but it was, for me anyway, I had to make myself stay engaged.
Yeah. The permissive parent, listen, you got to take a look at your own heart and say, why am I being permissive? Is it because I'm trying to impress my kids? Everybody's seen the parent that they were more concerned with being their kid's friend than their parent. Listen, your kids don't want you to be their friend. Their friends are cooler than you already. All their nerdy friends are cooler than you. None of them is hoping that they get a new best friend, and it's you, not one of them. Being your kid's best friend is not good parenting. It's just not. It's permissive parenting. And here's what it ends up doing in the life of the child. The child internalizes that as, my parents don't care enough about me to make me do what's right. I have, as a pastoral counselor, I've had kids tell me, my parents don't care about me. They let me do whatever I want. I mean, literally in one sentence, nailing down the parenting problem right there. Proverbs 19:18 says, listen, this is about 3,000-year-old wisdom. Discipline your children while there is hope. If you don't, you will ruin their lives. Feel that word, ruin. Discipline your children while there's hope. If you don't, you will ruin their lives. Controlling parenting is characterized by overcorrecting, criticizing, nitpicking, those kinds of things. But get this, it has this weird bedfellow. Right alongside the harsh, barking parent is the overprotective, hovering parent. And that is controlling as well. For one controlling parent, the correction is inflexible, it's harsh, it's demanding, it's mean-spirited. It uses words and tones that tear kids down. They interrupt the kids, they ridicule them, and they ignore the kid if they're not doing what's right. But a subtler form of that is overprotection. And the motive for both of them is fear that my kid won't turn out to be exactly what I want them to be. Fear that my kid won't do exactly what I want them to do. Fear that my kid will embarrass me in front of other people. Whether you're cracking the whip or whether you are overprotecting your children, you're being a controlling parent. And as I mentioned before, it's been a concern of mine that my wife keeps telling me I did a better job than I think I did. Whether a child is parented by permissive, neglectful, or controlling parents, any one of those three, the end result is that a child will feel emotionally wounded and will suffer some level of rejection by parents. And you're going, but I haven't rejected them. I know that. But they can't tell. And so if you end up in either of those three quadrants, you have to understand that your child is at risk of feeling like you have rejected them as a person. They feel emotionally wounded, and wounded children end up acting out. They're the ones that end up in the principal's office, okay? And here's some ways that children who are wounded, bearing the wound of rejection, that they might act out. Rebellion, open defiance, lying or deceiving, deliberate disobedience. We also have seen and run enough data through the grid that we find out that drug involvement, early sexual involvement, running away, joining antisocial groups, gang activity, and individual crime. Almost all of those kids were parented by either permissive, neglectful, or controlling parents. Almost all. Now here's some hope. You go, well, my kids aren't doing any of that. I'm getting it right. Good, you may be. But there are also some things that you can look for before they act out. Okay? Before they start, just slashing the tires and doing all that. Look for these things because these are less, they're a bit more subtle, less obvious, and they can help you come alongside your kid and help correct. You're going to model and teach good behavior one more time. If you see a kid who is consistently struggling with sadness or sorrow, you may think in clinical terms of depression, and they very well may be. But the first thing to look for as a parent is, wait a minute, what am I doing to help support a child who feels so unsupported that they are saddened all of the time? Okay? You can look for perverse or abusive language. You can look for excessive fatigue, tiredness. Little kids are full of energy. If you don't believe that, come coach soccer with me. They got more than I've got, right? But if you see a little kid, of course, there may be physical issues as well. Take your kids to the doctor, get them a checkup. If you see a kid that is sleeping way, way too much of the time, they're probably suffering some depression, and that may have a chemical, physical cause, or it may be a situation in your home. If you see kids who are unable to cope with everyday adversity, if you see a little kid who has a hardened conscience, their consciences are still supposed to be tender enough that they can feel it when they do wrong. When you see a kid who's got a steely conscience, insensitive conscience while they're still in grade school, there's a good chance that there's a parenting problem that has left that kid to the place where he feels like, I can't feel any of the feelings that make me vulnerable. Okay? Or an uncontrolled temper. You can look for any of those things as kind of early indicators that you might need to have some sit-down conversations with parents, with the other parent, and with your kids about how they're not feeling loved, supported, accepted, those kinds of things. Okay? Parenting style that gives the best result is effective parenting. Effective parenting is characterized by both acceptance and accountability. Listen, do you balance those things? We're going to talk about that next week. But here's your homework between now and then. Look for ways this week that with each one of your kids, you can give them the acceptance. For this week, I'm just going to tell you, don't worry about accountability. Okay? Listen, I'm giving you a break from the hard part of parenting for 1 week. Why don't you just for this week focus on making sure that your kids feel loved. And what was that? What's the word for loved? Preferred. That if your kid can actually feel like you prefer their well-being over yourself, find a way to help them feel loved. Find a way to help them feel approved. What's the word for approved? Liked, right? We want them to know that mom and dad like them. It means you may have to sit down and let them tell you about Legos or their video game or their annoying little friends, right? And take an interest in them. But if they have a sense that mom and dad like them, you've done your homework this week. And then if you could cheer them on, just help that kid, encourage them a little bit so that they feel like they're getting something right in this world. If you'll do those 3 things, that's 3 things for each kid. Help them feel loved, accepted, and supported. You'll have parented well. You'll have actually been an effective parent this week. Because trust me, they'll give you plenty of opportunities for you to apply the accountability the next week. Okay, Lord, would you help us? We don't get any of this stuff automatically. I mean, we've been doing some of it. Next week, we'll kind of learn about how to balance those things a little bit. But this week, Lord, I wonder if maybe some of my friends here are feeling like, man, I've just been blowing it. I've got it all wrong. Maybe some of them feel like I have, that I literally got it all wrong. I did the worst kind of parenting. Lord, I just pray that you get your comforting arms around my friends. My guess is that the folks who show up to learn how to parent are, if they're not getting it part right now, they're well on their way toward it. Would you just whisper to each one of the folks who are in this room as they lay their heads on their pillow tonight, Lord, would you whisper to them one assurance? Would you just help them to see one thing that they've been getting right? Then, Lord, would you just give them clarity of mind as they parent this week, that they can intentionally give that acceptance to their kids. Help us to get that part, just that part right for 1 week in a row. I ask in your holy name. Amen. All right. We'll see you guys Sunday or Wednesday.
Question.
Yep.
Did you come up with a list of the books that you have read that you would recommend?
List of books. Yeah. We will, we can do that. We probably still own most of them, huh?
I was going to say Strong-Willed Child was one.
Oh, baby. Yeah. Third and fourth and fifth edition of the strong. Yeah, we will. We'll come up with a reading list for you. And tell you what, we'll go one better. We'll come up with a list of books, and then knowing that people don't read like they used to, we'll come up with some articles that are shorter. Okay? So we'll put together a bibliography for everybody for next week. We'll have it printed and ready to go in your handout next week. Okay? Good suggestion.
Could we also have something for grandparents? As, you know, because that is
Yes.
relationship,
Yes.
but still very important.
It is. And I'll tell you this much. I think that that I'm going to give you my one sentence on grandparenting that we can unpack later. I think it's time for grandparents to make grandparenting count for something than being the favorite grandparents. And what I mean is this. The bulk of the accountability needs to be administered by parents. Grandparents get an unfair leg up on the acceptance thing. Well, since you already get, you have an unfair advantage at communicating acceptance, go big on it. I mean, go big on it, because every teenager thinks their mom hates them. They need to know grandma doesn't, right? But I really think that grandparents in particular in America have become so consumed with the notion of I want my grandkids to like me, or maybe to be the favorite grandparents, I'm the fun grandpa, that we haven't made the full impact for passing our faith onto our grandkids. See, there's an awful lot of things about Jesus, Bible, religion, morals that kids, particularly teenagers, do not want to hear from their parents. They won't listen. But grandma and grandpa get to say dang near anything if they'll approach the grandkids with love instead of with the same harsh tone that a tired mom might sometimes, or a tired dad might sometimes take. I think it's time for the Christian grandparents in America to be the ones who take seriously the business of passing the baton of the faith on. We've been trying to do that, each generation. Laura and I were really intentional about discipling our kids, but maybe this is one of those things that sort of skips generations. You might actually be far more effective at passing your faith on to your grandkids than you are your kids, because kids don't try to rebel against grandma and grandpa, right? So there's 2 cents worth, but we will talk about some ways that grandparents can help build that sense of acceptance for kids next week. Thanks for putting it on the radar. Yeah, you bet. Now I need to go talk to some grandparents because I don't have any grandkids. I don't know how to do it. But I'll make something up, though, and sound like I know what I'm talking about. So we'll see y'all next week.